Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a really good time in your workshop and that you've enjoyed that. We are now joined by our lunchtime keynote speaker, Mark Russell from Children's Society. Mark, it's a joy to have you with us today, and we are so grateful that you have partnered with us at Joined Up Conference. Can I ask where you're beaming to us from today?
From a little town called Fleet in northeast Hampshire, just south of London.
Wonderful.
Although
wonderful.
I do have my Henderson's Relish mug with me because you can take the out of Sheffield, but I still got my Henders.
So much better than Worcestershire sauce. Well done for Henderson's Relish. Mark, we are so pleased that you can be with us, and I just want to remind everybody that while you're doing your keynote, just to think about any questions that they might have for you, and they can put those in the menti.com for us, and we will come to those when you've finished. But it's really good to have you with us, Mark. Over to you.
Thank you so much for the welcome, and thank you so much for having me along today. I'm gutted not to be with you in person. Having lived in the fabulous city of Sheffield for a decade, I was so looking forward to being back in South Yorkshire today, but here I am in Hampshire. But I'm so grateful that technology allows us to meet like this. Before I begin, I want to say something which in some respects, if you remember nothing else I say, which is more than plausible, I want you to remember this. Thank you. Thank you for being there for young people through this horrendous year. Thank you for investing your life, your energy, your care in young people's lives. Thank you for going the extra mile to keep in touch with young people and support them through the most demanding year of their lives. You're fantastic, you're amazing, and I'm in awe of you. Some years ago, I had a fridge magnet that a young person gave me in my youth group in Northern Ireland. And it said this. It said, in 20 years' time, no one will remember what you said, but the world will be better because you were important for a young person. That young person who gave me that magnet is now a GP and making the world a better place in the middle of this pandemic. I think you're all heroes. Without question, this has been the most demanding year of our lives, I suspect. And all my friends who are parents and my neighbours here, every single parent has told me how their children's lives have suffered this year, how their children's mental health has suffered this year. And all my friends and neighbours' children live in safe homes with people who love them, who have enough food on the table and they're cared for. And they've suffered so much this year. So for the millions of young people who live in poverty, the millions of young people who live in poor housing or face abuse or neglect or exploitation, this has been a truly horrendous year. As a country, we have lost a collective line of sight to the most vulnerable children in the land. And I and my team are really worried about the long-term impact of this crisis on children's lives. I have the privilege of being the chief executive of the Children's Society, and as you may know, my background is as a relational youth worker. I like to think I still am a relational youth worker, and it is the most important job in the world. But I lead an extraordinary organisation founded 140 years ago by another relational youth worker who was based in South London. Edward Rudolph was a Sunday school teacher in a parish in Vauxhall, who noticed one week that 2 boys in his class were missing. He went searching for them and found them begging on the street. He discovered that their father had died and their mum had no money for food. He couldn't believe it. Children begging on the streets. I think it was Steve Jobs who founded Apple that said some of the biggest vision was born in the greatest anger. And I think Edward Rudolph was a really angry man, angry that children were begging on the streets, and the Children's Society was started in that moment of anger. And for 140 years, we've never lost it. We've never lost that anger that too many children live in poverty, anger that too many children are dependent on a food bank, anger that too many children are being abused, neglected, or exploited by criminal gangs. I know God doesn't have favourites. I know he doesn't. But if he did, I suspect that children and young people, and particularly the most vulnerable children and young people, are right next to the very heartbeat of God. I believe that every young person, every child in this country, regardless of their background, regardless of their postcode, regardless of their parents' wealth, every young person deserves the best chance in life to walk tall, to be the best they can be, to be filled with hope, and have the chance to be the best version of themselves. Our team work with young people battling very complex mental health issues. We support young people living in poverty or poor housing. We help young people at risk. We support lone child refugees, and we help young people who are being exploited. Our teams do the most extraordinary work and make a real difference in the lives of thousands of young people across the country. And I am unbelievably proud of the edgy and pioneering and innovative work that our team does. But we can only do our job because thousands and thousands of incredible people stand beside us, pray for us, support us, give money to help us find the 40 million we need to keep this show on the road. So if your church runs a Christingle or you support the Children's Society in any way at all, I want to say a massive thank you. We are so grateful for our partnership with the Church of England. But if I can be honest, leading an organisation of this scale and size in a pandemic has been the most demanding thing I've ever done in my life. But as I look around me, life is hard for too many children. Over 4 million children in this country are living in poverty. Let that number sink in. 4 million. That is per capita more children in poverty now than when Edward Rudolph started this organisation 140 years ago. Millions of children are living in poor and inadequate housing. Millions of young people are not getting the support they need for the mental health challenges they have. Too many children are being exploited or groomed or abused. And our research shows that life is getting harder for young people every year. Our Good Childhood Report, which is the only major analysis of children's well-being in the country. Incidentally, the government measure adults' well-being, but not children's well-being. We do the largest survey of children's well-being. And we have shown year after year for a decade that children's well-being in this country is getting worse. And last year, our report showed that children's well-being in the United Kingdom was the lowest in all of Europe. Now, I think that's a disgrace and a scandal. And that is why the Children's Society have set a bold goal for this decade, that by 2030, we'll have overturned that decline in children's well-being and set a path for long-lasting growth. So I promise you this, we are going to raise up the volume, we're going to lift our voice, and we're going to throw the kitchen sink at this, because we believe that every child in this country should be able to thrive, not just survive. So I was asked to share a little bit about what we're up to as an organisation. So what I wanted to tell you about is our commitment to being a systems changing organisation. We want to affect bigger change in the world, to change the law, to change how government spends money, to have ambition to change the whacking great systems that fail too many young people, the mental health system, the criminal justice system, the education system. In my last job, when I was the leader of Church Army, I remember showing the remarkable Desmond Tutu around a homeless project in London. And he said the work that we were doing there was incredible. But he said it was like fishing drowning people out of a river. He said, Mark, you have to go upstream and stop people falling into that river or being pushed in. And so what I wanted to share a little bit was about some of that stuff that we're trying to do to go upstream and stop young people either falling into the river or being pushed in. We know that some of the young people in this country who struggle the most are young people who live in care. And we know that more young people from care backgrounds end up homeless. Why is that? Well, we all know that so many young people are living with their families well into their 20s and sometimes 30s because housing is so extraordinarily expensive in this country and they can't afford to move out. But what happens if you're in care? When you're 18 and when you hit that cliff edge, all the support that you had from the government disappears. And yet the day after your 18th birthday, you're still a vulnerable young person, but all the support mechanisms and the scaffolding around you vanishes. So the young people we work with who've been in care have told us how hard this is. So we ran a campaign, some of you might have got involved with it, to ask the government to put more support in place for care leavers. We asked our supporters to email their MP, and just before lockdown, just this time last year, I was invited to meet with the Minister in the Department for Work and Pensions, who was responsible for housing benefit, who told me that he had so many emails from our supporters that he'd looked into it and he decided to back our campaign. And a few hours later, the Chancellor of the Exchequer stood at the dispatch box to give his first budget. And Rishi Sunak announced that the housing benefit payments for care leavers were rising. And so because of the voices of thousands of our supporters, because of the stories of the young people we work with, the law changed. And thousands of young people leaving care now have higher housing benefit because of that work. That's the going upstream and stopping those care leavers falling into the river. So that's what we try to do. We try to take the stories of the young people we work with, the stories of the lives of those young people, and translate that into campaigning and policy work to change the world so that other young people don't experience it. Now, I thank God for Marcus Rashford, but I think it's pretty grim on our national conscience that it takes a Premiership footballer to challenge the government and guilt trip them into ensuring that children don't go hungry. So what have we done in that space? Well, on the back of Marcus Rashford's incredible work, we've worked with the government and we've got our supporters involved in our Strengthening the Safety Net campaign to fight for more money for local authorities to help families in crisis and destitution. Working with our friends in the Trussell Trust, and because of the voices of thousands of our campaigners, the government have now put £300 million of extra money into local authorities to support families in crisis. That money runs out at the end of March, and I've got a meeting with the minister next week to talk about what he's going to do next. So that's what we do, that whole going upstream piece. And the Children's Society is one of the leading charities in the country helping young people at risk of county lines gangs. And one of the things we're trying to do is to stop more young people being at risk. And so my team worked with Hollyoaks on the soap opera, and we worked with them to write a script about the impact of county lines, and my team helped train the actors so we could show the impact of county lines to a big audience of young people. And the actor Billy Price, who played Sid Sumner, who was the centre of that story, has been a massive supporter of our work ever since. And I'm really glad on this conference today you've got my colleague Jenny Griffiths, who's with us, and she's leading a workshop on child exploitation, how we can all do better at spotting the signs. And I should just say Jenny's part of our prevention team, who came first in a major award ceremony this week for the Partnership Award to bring about change in young people's lives. But one of the things that our team have seen by supporting young people at risk of county lines is that the police officers don't often have the right offences in their charge book to get these criminals and to nail them for what they're doing to young people. They don't have the right charges to really go after these criminals. And so we've seen that, and our team have worked that up into a policy ask. And we've basically decided to try and persuade the government to introduce a new criminal offence, an offence of controlling and coercing a child. The Times ran a major article on that this week, and I've met with both the Safeguarding Minister and the Victims Minister to argue the government should put that offence into law to protect more children. Throughout this pandemic, we've tried to meet with government regularly to speak up for the young people across this country who are finding this pandemic too hard, to bring the stories of what our teams are telling us. And we've fought really hard, particularly on mental health. And we've just heard yesterday that the pressure we've put on government on mental health has secured another £79 million for young people's mental health support. It's nowhere near enough, but it's a step in the right direction. Now, I believe with all my heart that we have to keep arguing for this kind of change, that children's lives should get better in this country and not worse, that children's well-being should be going up and not down. And we have the integrity to argue for that change, because everything we do is earthed in the stories of the thousands of young people that we help every single day. Their stories, their struggles, their issues give us the energy and the passion and the determination to fight for bigger change. I believe with all my heart we can make the world a fairer place for young people. We can make it more decent, that life shouldn't be so difficult for so many young people. I believe with all my heart that the arc of the future really does bend toward justice. Now, some time ago, I used to think I was an optimist. And then I read an article by a writer called Rebecca Solnit, whose book is on my shelf. And she said that optimists and pessimists have one thing in common. They both believe they don't have to do anything at all. Optimists don't have to do anything because everything's going to get better. And pessimists don't do anything because it's always going to get worse. Solnit argues that the world is transformed by hope-filled people. People who are filled with hope, who dare to believe that they have the voice and the energy and the capacity to affect change in the world. I've never heard a better definition of youth workers in all my life, and I've never heard a better definition of the church in all my life. We are a hope-filled people, and we dare to believe that we can make the world a better place, and we must make the world a better place. We must pass on a fairer world to the next generation. Children should not be suffering the way so many are. So, my friends, let's be a hope-filled people, and let's encourage the young people we work with, despite what social media tells them, despite what the headlines say. Let's encourage them to be hope-filled people. Let's encourage our young people to be passionate about justice, because justice is not just us. Let's encourage them to believe that their voice can affect change, that their voice and their energy and their compassion can change the world. Get your young people meeting their MP, their councillors, have them engage with the issues with those politicians, give them confidence and the skills to passionately argue for a better and fairer world. My first youth work job was in Northern Ireland, bringing Protestant and Catholic kids together in the run-up to the Good Friday Agreement. And I dared to challenge my young people that they could change the world. And they did, but they took me at my word. And they wrote letters to every politician in Northern Ireland, demanded to meet them. And guess what? They did. I took the young people to meet Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern, They met the First Lady of the United States, Hillary Clinton. They met Ian Paisley and Jerry Adams and David Trimble and John Hume. They met them all, and they challenged them to fight for a better Northern Ireland for their generation. And guess what? The peace deal happened, and we've had 20 years of relative peace in Northern Ireland because of those young people and their passion for justice. So please encourage your young people to believe in a better world. You know, last Friday I did something amazing that I was just so excited to do. I got to speak to the year 6 pupils in a little tiny primary school in Northern Ireland that I went to. And I told them that when I was 10 years old, in that very same school, that I wanted to change the world. And that a grown-up had told me that I grew out of it when I got older. And I went back to that little school to tell them that 35 years later, I hadn't grown out of it. And I still want to change the world. And so I want to encourage you to inspire the young people you lead to be hope-filled people, full of the Holy Spirit, following the inspiration of Jesus Christ, to have a vision of a better and more fair world, to dare to believe that they can make it better. And I would be thrilled if you wanted to join us in our work for the young people that we serve, to help us in that fight for big change upstream. We have a whole pile of resources on our website that we can help you with, and resources for youth groups and for Lent and for Mothering Sunday. And we're currently working with the Diocese of Sheffield to produce a new resource on friendship and good friendship for young people aged 8 to 11. And it's drawing on our world-leading research on well-being. And we're so grateful to our good friend Hugh Thomas in Sheffield Diocese who's written this for us with input from young people from across the diocese schools. And we'll launch this resource at our church team webinar in May. So please do check it out. I've got an amazing colleague called Helen Whiteley, who's our relationship manager for this part of the world. Well, I mean, your part of the world, not this part of the world. So please do reach out to her and see how she can support you in your work and how you can get involved in the Children's Society's transforming work. Friends, I don't know about you, but nothing in my leadership toolkit, no book I've ever read, no course I've ever attended, prepared me to be a leader in this year. And I'm sure that's true for you too. It's felt like we've been throwing the railway track down as the train is hurtling at speed. And I know you'll have done all kinds of things to grow your community with your groups using technology, to maintain a lifeline to the young people you support. But I am under no doubt that for many of you watching this today, you're exhausted and tired from the most demanding year, as you've done so much for the young people. So I guess my final word is this: please look after yourself. The young people in Yorkshire need you, but they need you not to be burning your candle at both ends, or as I used to do, cutting my candle in half and burning it at all 4 ends. Please take time for you. Take time to be refreshed and take time to be renewed. Do things that give you life and energize you. You cannot give what you haven't got. Make sure you're nourishing your own soul and your own heart and putting your well-being and your mental health first. When I was starting off in youth work in Northern Ireland, my boss was a man called Sean. And it was long before the days of electronic diaries. We used to have our calendars on the wall in the office. And every Monday, without fail, it would say on Sean's diary, Sean's on a course. It wasn't health and safety, it wasn't safeguarding, it was a golf course every Monday. And nobody asked questions because it just said he was on a course. Everyone assumed he was doing a PhD or a master's or something. But he knew he couldn't do what he did without resourcing his own soul and resting. And so please, look after yourselves. You are doing the most important job in the world. You're being there for young people who need you. So thank you for having me today. Thank you for all that you're doing to support young people. And I hope in a small way what I've shared has encouraged you about the serious systems change work that my team are trying to do to make the world better for more young people. So please, I hope you'll stand with us, pray for us, support us, donate to us, and help us in our fight for hope to really transform the world for more young people. Thanks for listening.
Mark, thank you so much for your passion. We're so glad that we could connect with you this year and with the Children's Society. It's evident, clearly evident, that you're massively involved in lots of very important places in our society, working upstream, as you've said, using your influence and your power to do what you can. And I'm encouraged, and I'm excited as a practitioner, as somebody who encourages other youth workers as well to remember the really key and important issues that we face and that the young people that we work with and the children that we work with face to. So thank you so much for sharing that. We have now an opportunity for some questions. We've been asking you to submit some questions for Mark, and this is the point where we hope that some of you have engaged with our menti.com questions. It won't be very helpful to put questions in the chat at this point because we can't read that at the same time as engaging on screen here. But what we will do is have a few questions. One has appeared over my head, so we're going to start with this one. Mark, how can we look after those shielding who feel unable to come back to the face-to-face ministry? That's from Lydia.
Thank you, Lydia, for the question. I think actually for all young people, re-engaging with face-to-face is going to be hard. I think there's going to be challenges to help bridge young people back into the new normal. But for those who can't and who continue to shield, I think we are going to have to work really hard to maintain the line of sight that we've had through this last year, using technology and using Teams and Skype and Zoom and all that stuff to encourage young people and to help build the confidence in them that when the time is right for them to step back in. I think, if you looked at the Children's Society's portfolio of work 2 years ago, everything we did was face-to-face. Then for the last number of months, everything we've done has been virtual. I suspect, and interestingly, actually, some of my practitioners who thought that working virtually wouldn't work have been converted. Some people have told me that they've been engaging young people who've said they never would have come to drop-in services because they hadn't the confidence. So I think all of us are going to work in a blended way on the other side. And I think finding a way to, if you do have a face-to-face group meeting in your youth group, of perhaps having a Zoom into that as well for those who can't join, to help them feel part of that community and part of the same group. We've all learned to do that better. And I think going forward, that'll be helpful. But encourage those young people that they're still part of your community, that you love them, and that when they're ready, they'll be welcomed back into face-to-face with open arms. But thanks for all you're doing.
Yeah, it's really gentle work that goes on. I think a lot of those who have connected with us this morning at Joined Up are involved with that really gentle work of helping those in very fragile, delicate situations. Some are shielding, some leaders are shielding. And it feels really gentle, doesn't it? But I agree. I think there'll have to be a mixed mode.
One of the other groups of young people who I think have struggled so much during this pandemic have been young carers, and we do a lot of work with young carers. And I was talking to a young carer the other day, and she said something to me that really spoke to me. She said, "Mark, everyone's talking about lockdown and how hard it is to be restricted and what you can do and where you can go." She goes, "That's my life every day. That's what it's always like." And actually, I think for a lot of young carers, they will be probably some of the last to get back into education and in person, and the last to get back into groups like yours, because they are really nervous about passing this awful virus to the people that they're caring for. And they're a group of young people who frequently fall through the cracks, and my guys are doing all we can to speak up for them in government.
Fantastic. Have we got another question coming through from NT?
Oh, did you see it?
Yeah, very quick. So they're similar really, but how do we deal with the potential social anxiety of getting back together in person? Are there any tips on?
I'm a big believer in the vulnerability of leaders playing a big part of this. So actually, it's about us role modeling that we're anxious about it too, and that we're nervous about it too. And I think if we're able to do that, then young people will know it's not just them. I think every youth group is going to be different, but I think it's going to require thought about when it's done, how it's done, what sort of space it is. It might be better to do it outside because we're getting into better weather. People might feel safer meeting outside for the first time when we're allowed, and doing some sort of gentle outside event where people can keep distance if they need to or feel more comfortable, but they are beginning to re-engage with physical community in a way that they haven't perhaps for the year that's just gone.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you.
Next question. Want to run a drop-in after school club for year 6, 7 and 8s, but at what point do you advertise? I understand the feeling behind this. How have we been able to plan anything for the last year? But this is a question about planning, Mark. Any wisdom?
No. actually. I don't. I think we just are going to have to watch the government. And I'm not going to make any judgment on how the government have handled their comms over the last year, but I hope that it'll be better in the weeks to come. I think the question that Nicola's just asked, every school in the country has been asking for the last fortnight. And I think we're going to just have to see how the advice pans out, what the scientists tell us, and certainly, you know, what we'll try and do is, I'm very conscious that I lead one of the largest children's charities in the country, and we've got resources that other organisations don't have. And so one of the things we tried to do very early on in last March was just push out all the advice we had into a public space, so other organisations could have it, advice around how to do online groups, advice how to do youth work in a different way. So when we know the answer to that question, Nicola, we'll put it on our streams and publish it, so you know you can have the same advice that we're giving our teams.
That's really helpful, Mark. I think that notion of making sure people are tapping into everything that's out there and finding out the good advice is really important. Okay, we've got a high percentage of great women here. Great. How can we encourage men and older boys into work with children?
That's an amazingly important question, and I'm really grateful for all the amazing women on this call, and we're all getting ready for International Women's Day next week, and I lead a senior leadership team which is predominantly women as well. I'm very proud of that we have such diversity across our organisation. But you're right, we need to encourage more. And actually, I think if the education minister were sat here, he would say the same thing, because there's a real struggle to encourage men into teaching. So I think my way of doing it would be to encourage the boys in your youth groups to volunteer with the work, and to begin to inspire them about the life-changing impact that work can have, either as a youth leader or as a teacher. We need more. We need more diversity across the piece, actually, not just in terms of gender. We need more diversity across the piece in youth work and children's work and in education. And we have to work really hard for that. So I would begin by helping the young people in your groups to volunteer and catch for themselves the energy and the infectiousness of being a youth worker that we've all caught and never lost.
Thank you for that. Mark, I want to ask a little bit about the roles that we play as children's and youth and schools workers gathered together today. I feel a lot of us are very focused on what's in front of us, the children, the young people that we can connect with and nurture them and support them, encourage them and love them. But I'm just thinking over what you shared with us earlier about the systems changes and the sort of upstream work. Is there anything that you can encourage people like me, people who are watching this today, who maybe in the past have been more focused on their more immediate community, the young people and the children that they've connected, how they can sort of be the role model that maybe they need to be to help the children and young people they work with also start to think about work upstream?
That's an amazing question. And I suppose, I think part of it comes out of helping young people see the issues in their community that they see that other young people face, and then begin to help them tease out solutions for that themselves. So that it's not just a bunch of adults telling them this is what we have to do to solve this, blah, 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 blah. But actually young people begin to think through the solutions for themselves. And then I would encourage you to help them take action about that. And when I was a youth worker in Hertfordshire 20 odd years ago, goodness me, I feel so old when I say that. I remember we just used to bring our MP in, and bless him, he came, and he didn't really need to, because he had a majority of like 40,000. It was a Tory stronghold. It wasn't that he was going to lose the seat if he didn't talk to these young people. But he came once a month and sat on a bar stool in our church hall, and the young people fired at him all the issues that they'd been talking about that the community needed to work on. Those young people ended up in the House of Commons with him, talking to other MPs about some of those issues. I think it begins by helping to sow seeds in those young people that the world as is not the world that should be, and to tap into that naive wisdom that young people have that hasn't yet been corrupted by cynicism, that actually the world can be better, and get them involved with their local council. So we did this project in my last youth work job, where we called it the village cleanup, and we literally just got these young people out into the community, lifting litter, taking graffiti off walls, helping elderly people with their gardens, And, I wrote a press release for the Watford Observer, and the flipping journalist didn't print it. And I was incensed. I thought, if those young people were wrecking gardens, or they were putting graffiti on walls, or they were destroying pensioners' gardens, that would be in the front page. Scandal, outrage, generation at loot. And I rung the editor of the Watford Observer, and there is something, even now, there is something scary for English people about a ranting Northern Irish person. And I rung up and I yelled on the phone, he goes, you, and do you know what? The editor of the Watford Observer allowed me to write the front page of the Watford Observer the following week, and I did. And from that point onwards, that paper ran stories about young people making a difference in their community. So make those connections, make connections with your local paper, with the police, with the council, with your MP. Get them in and talk to the young people and help them see that they have a voice and that they have the capacity to change the world. And get them writing letters to politicians and demanding change. I mean, if I were a youth worker today with my own youth group, the issue I would be getting my young people exercised on would be food banks. I think it's a scandal and a disgrace that there is a food bank system in this country. And my good friend Emma, who's the chief executive of Trussell, wants to do herself out of a job because she doesn't think they should be there. I'd be getting young people in that space arguing that children shouldn't need a footballer to fight for food, that every child should have what they need to survive. So yeah, sorry, it's here into the sermon. Get them involved and get their voices heard.
Brilliant, thank you, Rachel. I think we've got one more.
We've got one more that's come through. We've got, what is advice for parents of adopted children who have become very vulnerable and made poor choices? So yeah, advice for parents whose young people are struggling.
I mean, that's a really difficult question, and I think that's the reality for so many families around the country at the moment, where we know that one of the biggest referrals into children's social care are schools, and schools have been closed for such a large part of this year to too many young people. And the government will tell you, oh, well, vulnerable children have been in school. Well, they haven't actually, because I've got that number out of the government. At the high point of that, only a quarter of vulnerable children were in school. So 3/4 of those that we already know are vulnerable have not been in school. Never mind all the other children who've not yet been classed as vulnerable, who've experienced unbelievable hardship over this year. So I think families have had the most extraordinary challenge this year. Obviously, I don't know the specifics behind this particular question, but what I would say is that if parents are concerned about their children, that they should talk to their school first, and they should talk to their social services department as well, and get the advice that they need to help make sure that those children are properly safeguarded and looked after at this very difficult time. But actually, beyond the question, I'm really concerned that throughout this lockdown, criminals have found different ways to groom children and that's why we've been arguing for this legislative change, so that police have the toolkit to go after these people. So I would also say, I suppose, just as a tangential point, that I think parents and families should be continually to educate their children on particularly around online safety. And there's a plethora of resources on our website and on my good friends at the NSPCC, where we can help educate children to make better choices with technology, because we've all become so reliant on technology through this very tough time.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you to those of you who managed to work the menti.com technology and submit some questions there. I'm guessing the conversation on the chat is livening up. Do continue that as well, especially over lunchtime. We'll have some green rooms open in our breakout rooms, where if you can go and get a bit of fresh air and stretch your legs during lunch, please do. Please don't stare at the screen for the whole time. But part of Joined Up is usually time in our breakout, time to eat lunch together and time to chat. So we're going to try and offer that. Mark's disappeared, but thank you so much, Mark, for your wisdom this morning, and sharing with us and encouraging us to kind of take up the gauntlet, take up the challenges that are before us. Maybe this lockdown has helped some of us open our eyes a little bit wider about the roles that we could be playing in our communities with the children and young people that we work with.